At 20 minutes past, now we move on to our next story, which is a conversation we're having now with Dianah Chiyangwa, who is a freelance journalist and associate with the Oxpeckers Investigative Environment Journalism. And she speaks to us about this COP30 heading to Brazil this November, and also something new that is on the agenda, that is for the first time information integrity, or the fight against fake news and misinformation will be part of the central theme. We're seeing a worrying rise in disinformation, we're told, and both the UN and the World Economic Forum have flagged it as a major global risk. This isn't just about politics, it's also about undermining trust in science and creating deep polarization, especially in the climate debate. So we are joined now, as I mentioned, by Dianah Chiyangwa, freelance journalist. A very good evening to you, Dianah, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening, Sepiso.
So let's just first start. We've just recently seen the M20 summit where information integrity was high up on the agenda and formed part of the declaration to be passed on to G20 leaders. So in this context, tell us about the program that you're going to take part in Denmark. What do you see, and what do the organizers see as a single most significant outcome of the ACS2, Africa Climate Summit 2, that could shift Africa from rhetoric towards real actionable climate solutions where, misinformation could actually counter this?
Let me start by saying that I'm currently on a reporting fellowship on the global climate crisis in the era of fake news, alongside other 25 journalists across the globe. The Anita Fellowship felt it necessary to equip journalists and also give us a platform to collaborate with scientists to fight misinformation. So this is in preparation, as we have said, this is in preparation for the COP30 that is coming up in November in Belém, Brazil.
Dianah, I don't know what happened, but we lost sound on your connection. I'm not sure if you inadvertently muted yourself. So you were talking about Brazil and going to look forward to that summit. If you could just pick up from there.
All right. So the program that we are currently participating in is to kind of equip journalists with tools to fight misinformation, and also a platform to collaborate with scientific researchers across the globe. That is in preparation of the COP30 that is coming up in November in Belém, Brazil.
So you speak about COP30, that is still going to happen in November. But as I mentioned, we've just seen this week wrap up with the Africa Climate Summit 2. So the second of its kind, taking place in Addis Ababa. And some of the countries, particularly Ethiopia, where it was being held, showcasing the various projects that they see the global south, in particular Africa, can, challenge rhetoric and take charge, take ownership of the global climate action plan. In the past, what types of misinformation would then make lie of, say, what leaders actually committed to, the declaration that came out of Addis?
Actually, I didn't follow the declaration that was in Addis because I was traveling to Denmark. But however, what we have seen is the growing misinformation, not only in Africa, but globally. It mainly is on adaptation and mitigation that delays also the climate action among leaders across the globe.
Okay. So obviously, if you're not a journalist and one is not aware of the structures, whether within newsrooms, the access to resources like fact-checking tools, or even the right news sources, can you just give a sense of the pitfalls of civilians or general public, their ignorance of some of the major issues, the strategies that are central to Africa, for instance, where those who are driving some sort of campaign of disinformation and misinformation can easily get away with, so that we can just situate why the fellowship you're on is important, particularly if we're talking about, South and North. The politics there are different. The agendas that are being driven are also different.
I think my colleagues and I, we had agreed on one thing, especially in the Southern African region, that if newsrooms can equip journalists with fact-checking skills, I think it will help us to be the drivers of climate science. And it's our responsibility as well as journalists to inform the public with correct information. However, what is missing is the lack of knowledge around fact-checking. I think I'm one of the luckiest. I am currently on another fellowship that is funded by Code for Africa and Norway Democracy. So for the past 6 months, I've been doing quite a number of fact checks, of which climate change is also part of the fact-checking claims that I've been working on. And the challenge that I can tell you now is to find a platform to publish the claims, the fact checks that I've been working on. But however, also the other thing that I have found along the way is that, as you mentioned, climate change can be political. As much as we find these claims, especially on social media platforms, because that is where most of misinformation can be found. Also, the challenges of being targeted as journalists when you try to debunk and try to make the public aware of what is climate change, and trying to also educate the public that climate change is real. But there are barriers in trying also to let out this information. So sometimes as journalists, we resort to publish those fact checks without our names on the byline.
But if you could just give us examples that are, as we say, it's important to tackle information integrity because it can be a global risk. Can you just give us examples of how not only it will impede a progressive climate innovation compact, but also how it could put people's lives at risk, the environment at risk? Can you just give us examples of, because I'd imagine if you're doing a fellowship, you would have to tackle those specific examples.
Yes, absolutely. One example that I can give you is the flood in Umtata. When those floods happened, there was quite a number of misinformation on those floods, and I think it was fueled in a way that nobody's even paying attention about what happened in Umtata. It was just news that just passed. And so as my role as a journalist is to also fact check those, give evidence that climate change is real. So we had to debunk those misinformation claims that we found on social media, specifically on X. And also one thing that I have found very difficult in this fellowship that I'm currently doing with Code for Africa on fact-checking is that the drivers of climate misinformation are also making it difficult for us to debunk these claims. For example, there is a video that I saw on Threads, and that video had many countries that were affected by flood, but on the first 5 seconds of the clip, they said it's South Africa. But when I did the debunk and fact check those claims, I found out that it was somewhere in Philippines. So what happens? What they do now? They make sure that they make longer videos that are very difficult to debunk. And we have been speaking about news fatigue. that every time you switch on the TV, there's overwhelming news. So as fact checkers, if we write like long form fact-checked articles, people are not interested in reading long fact-checked articles. So, but however, it's still my responsibility and other responsibility of every journalist to make sure that we give information that is useful to the end user. That is our audience.
All right, Dianah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, your insights, Dianah Chiyangwa, for ensuring that climate journalism in Africa isn't just reactive but strategic and accountable. And that's why she is, as she says, on this fellowship with others in Denmark ahead of the COP30 summit in Brazil.